Hey guys, how are you? I'm inside my car. I'm still in the same park that I shot the last couple of videos, but I had to come inside because it's too noisy outside, like too much wind and too many plane flying noises and that kind of thing. Uh, and I'm going to talk to you today about how the common law was the best export of the British Empire. So if you see top countries in the Freedom Index, for example, nowadays, you're going to see that most of them were British colonies. You're going to see Singapore, you're going to see Hong Kong, you're going to see Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and they're all British colonies at one point or another. And they all use common law instead of civil law, which is pretty much the civil law is based on the Napoleonic Code. And the reason for most other countries using civil law is that, well, Napoleon really did conquer most of Europe, with the exception of Britain and a few other countries. And then naturally, other countries just, well, fell for that as well. And civil law is kind of terrible because it's based on abstracts. So it's based like civil law is based on like written law. So you write a law and then a judge bases each case individually, just based on the law, just based on what the law says. And that makes for a lot of room for interpretation because every law, no matter how specific, if you write it really generic, like, oh, I don't know, you shall not murder. That's a law. Then that's very broad. And it's like, well, what's murder? And did I actually murder someone if I killed them in self-defense? That there's a lot of questions that arise from that. But also, if you start specifying the law, it gets more and more rigid to a point where, obviously, well, depending on what you're talking about, murder is a little bit more broad. But depending on what you're talking about, it kind of stiffens the system, so to say. And that is the main problem with civil law, is thinking that abstracts can actually be translated into reality, and they can. Whereas common law is based on, well, the judge's laws, on that is on infinite amount, like you assume that there's an infinite amount of cases that are possible, and some of them are related and some of them are not related, and it goes to the judge, and to the lawyers that are trying to convince the judge to analyze which previous situation, the new situation that just arose, best resembles itself with. And so it makes for a much more cohesive judicial system that allows for predictability, for stability, and that is really, really valuable when you're trying to create wealth. Because if you're a business owner, if you're a company, or even if you're just like a normal guy, and you don't actually know, it happens a lot, for example, in Brazil, you don't know how the law is going to go. Like you honestly don't. Like someone sues you for the most crazy types of things, and you don't actually know which way it's going to go. You should know, but precedence doesn't actually, it isn't actually as predictable in the outcome of the decision as it is in common law countries like the US or England or Australia or whatever. And common law might have been the single most important export of the British Empire, because the other one that's very big is the Westminster system, right? But the problem with it is most countries that followed it only followed it like they've only got one house of legislation. So, for example, New Zealand only has one actual house of legislation. Ireland as well. Like there are symbolic houses like the House of Lords, but they don't actually make decisions. And I'm definitely pro a bicameral legislation, like there is in Australia, like there is in the US, like there is in Switzerland, because it protects you from stupid decision making, pretty much. Like if all of your house is elected every 4 years, and a particular event happens that makes it all go in a certain way on your X of that election, then that gives the house so much power to change so many things. Whereas if you have an upper house and a lower house, and they're only in like the upper house is only gradually elected. For example, in the U.S., it's a third every 2 years. So for a total of 6 years, votes from the past still influence decisions that are being made today, and that makes for a little bit more of a gradual change of power, and also for uh, a second thought, let's say, to decisions that are actually being made, and that is very important. But that's not British, that's not particularly English. They did have the two houses, but uh, uh, even nowadays, well, it has a lot. It's kind of symbolic, you know. Whereas in the U.S. and Switzerland and Australia, the upper house is not symbolic. It's actually a significant part of the legislative procedure, let's say. And but what those countries did keep, Switzerland, no, because it was never a colony, of course, and it was conquered by Napoleon. But what Australia, New Zealand, even the US did keep was common law. And I think that really, really helps those countries go in the right track, so to say, because it's a much more comprehensible system to protect private property, to protect individual interests, to protect even to just decentralize decision making. And you really see the outcome. Like you just have to see the outcomes. If you see Portuguese colonies, if you see Spanish colonies, if you see French colonies, I mean, literally all French colonies in Asia, like Vietnam or most of like sub-Saharan Africa, they're all dirt poor. And that's the thing. Like people forget that Napoleon was, well, an outcome of the French Revolution. And even though he might not have espoused everything that the revolution uh, intended, he did espouse some of it. And it was still like, they were still closely related. And so uh, the fact that he conquered Europe and that it influenced so many things in so many different aspects of life, like the metric system, for example, uh, it it has its costs, you know, because the French Revolution wasn't that smart. It wasn't exactly the most cohesive, peaceful, understanding, uh, yeah, understanding philosophy of the human mentality. No, it caused like a lot of death and a lot of violence and a lot of destruction and all that. And so, one thing that's often overlooked is exactly this civil system of law, which seems great, you know. Oh, yeah, let's stop depending on judges. Let's stop depending on subjective analysis. Let's write everything into law. But that's not how it works. It assumes that you're going to be able to foresee every single situation that there is, and you're not. And even if you try, and the more you try, the worse the law is going to be, because it's going to be specific and rigid and strict and arbitrary in infinite different numbers of ways that you could have never predicted because you don't know the future, you know? And so to let it be decentralized, to let decision making and case decision be more decentralized like it is in common law just makes for more cohesive sense. I want to know what you guys think about it. I'm not a lawyer, so it could be wrong. But yeah, this is the video for today. Cheers.